The Wizard of Oz is considered one of the most famous movies in all of cinema history. Without a doubt, it has changed cinema and has been iconic for generations. But at what cost? The price, and I'm not talking money-wise, the cost to make this movie was high on many levels. Bad enough that people say this movie is cursed. Few know the darkness and dread that took place behind the scenes to make the movie. From explosions, hospitalizations, and drugging people, The Wizard of Oz, without a doubt, has darkness behind it. And today, we take a peek behind the curtain and follow the yellow brick road through all of its terrible twists and turns, which get darker and darker along the way. A little background before we begin. We aren't in Kansas anymore. The Wizard of Oz has some dark history in it. First off, it was based on a book written by L. Frank Baum called The Wizard of Oz and was first published in 1900. The book and the following books in the series, a grand total of 14 books, would be met with great success. And Baum would die before filming would begin to bring his book to the big screen. Though there were other attempts, but the famous one that we all know of, he'd be long dead. Also, side note, the Wizard of Oz books are pretty messed up, and Baum was pretty racist. Like, he really did not like Native Americans. So if you ever go and read the originals, keep that in mind. The movie would begin filming October 13th, 1938, which I find fitting considering all the awful things that would take place. And before you think, Friday the 13th? It wasn't. Close though. October the 13th, 1938 lands on a Thursday, and the movie itself would debut in August 15th, 1939. And boy, it was a long injury-ridden year when making the movie. And from the get-go, the movie would have tons of issues, most stemming for the cast members. Starting off with the least injured from the filming, Toto, the beloved dog in the film. Luckily, the dog didn't get too hurt. During the filming of when the soldiers of the Wicked West came out to capture the heroes, a soldier accidentally stepped on the paw of Toto, causing a sprain. The stunt double would take over till Toto, whose real name was Terry, was fully healed up. That's about the lightheartedness it gets. It's only going to get darker from here, so you've been warned. It gets worse, far worse. And let's start with the Scarecrow himself. The Scarecrow, played by Ray Bolger, would receive chemical burns on his face from the prosthetics for his costume that he wore on his face. Marks that supposedly lasted for about a year. His costume would also be made with asbestos. Yeah, that cancerous substance. Reason why it was made from asbestos is that there is a scene in the movie where the Scarecrow catches fire. And to protect him from the fire, they made his costume with asbestos. Speaking of asbestos, boy, did they use a lot of it. There's a famous scene where Scarecrow, Kari Lion, Toto the dog, and Dorothy, the main actress, are falling asleep in the meadow as it starts to snow. That material they used to make the snow? Asbestos. So not only was the Scarecrow wearing asbestos, he was also breathing in asbestos as they made it snow on him. And asbestos at this time was not fully understood, and people did not know how dangerous it is. And The Wizard of Oz isn't the only movie at this time to use asbestos for snow. A good amount of movies around this period used asbestos for snow, even having nicknames for it, such as Pure White and White Magic. Sounds more like drug names than asbestos, but nonetheless, asbestos would be synthetic snow for many films. But I digress. We move to the Kari Lion, played by Burt Lahr, who had to have some courage and toughness to make it through the shooting of this film. You see, the lion's costume was less of a costume and more of, well, the real thing. That's right, the lion's costume used in The Wizard of Oz was made of actual lion hide, which caused the costume to weigh around 90 pounds or 41 kilograms. And because it was actual lion hide, there is no ventilation holes, which means there was no air circulating, and more importantly, nowhere for the sweat to go. Imagine wearing a 90-pound weighted vest while working a long shift that you can't take off, and you have to be ready to constantly put on a performance. And even worse, in the 1930s, extreme bright lights were needed in order to film in Technicolor, which is what they used in The Wizard of Oz. These extreme bright lights were not LEDs. LEDs haven't even been invented yet. These stage lights would make the studio get to temperatures of around 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which is around 38 degrees Celsius. And even worse, the lights help add carbon dioxide to the studio. Filming would have to be occasionally paused in order to air out the studio. So imagine all of this. 100 degrees, 90-pound real lion hide suit, long, possible the entire day, working day. Yeah, the Cowardly Lion sweated, and sweated a lot. So much so, the lion hide would have to be taken and dried to get rid of all the sweat each and every day after filming. Which I don't want to know what that costume smelled like. And because he sweated so much, and because he was only allowed to eat soup and milkshakes in order to not ruin his face makeup, which was hard to put on his face, even harder to do so because of the amount of sweat he would produce, it made his life a living hell. Luckily, after some time filming, he would ask for his makeup simply to be redone after lunch, so he could eat real food and not pass out from heat exhaustion. And the lion isn't the only one that had problems dealing with the heat. Another number of people who would struggle in the 100-degree oven of a studio would be the Wicked Witch's minions, the flying monkeys. Those actors also had heavy suits with little ventilation. Luckily, they weren't made from real monkeys, but the heavy cloth suits did make a few come close to heat strokes. And those weren't even the most unlucky flying monkeys, which is a weird sentence to say. The worst was a few poor souls who had to be flying monkeys for real, lifted on wires and moving around doing wire work, where two of the flying monkeys' cables holding them would break, causing the monkeys to fall and be sent to the hospital for broken and sprained bones. Luckily though, they didn't die. But they weren't the only ones to be sent to the hospital. One of the stars would end up being hospitalized and be replaced because the filming of The Wizard of Oz almost killed him. That would be the Tin Man. Originally supposed to be played by Buddy Ebsen, but things would go sideways, and quite fast. When filming and putting on makeup on Buddy, to give his face that metallic look, they would use makeup consisting of aluminum dust and paste. This makeup would cause Buddy to have a reaction, and a severe one at that, and he would be hospitalized and put on oxygen because of it. The producers basically then told him to man up and get over it, and Buddy said, "No, I'm not trying to die." So in turn, they would recast the part of the Tin Man to Jack Haley, who would also have a reaction to the aluminum paste makeup, but luckily, not as severe as Buddy. Jack would only get an eye infection, but his troubles as the Tin Man wouldn't end there. You see, much like the Cowardly Lion, for the Tin Man, they wanted to make the costumes as authentic as possible. So, they used actual heavy metal. Again, wearing a metal costume in 100 degrees, that Tin Man was cooking. And the metal costume was so stiff, he couldn't even sit down. The only way he could rest was by leaning on a board or against a wall. Having toxic makeup, not being able to sit, wearing a metal costume in a hot room and working for long hours, doesn't sound like a great time. Still though, it beats being in the hospital on oxygen like the first Tin Man. Speaking of replacements and stunt doubles, the Wicked Witch, that poor woman, played by Margaret Hamilton, she would have a rough go when filming The Wizard of Oz. Starting off with the least of her problems, her makeup. And you guessed it, it was more toxic makeup. Her hands and her face would be covered with green paint, which was toxic, being poisoned anytime she accidentally swallowed some, and when your face and hands are completely coated with it, I imagine it's hard for some not to get into you. Well, every time she would accidentally digest some, she would be sick and not be able to eat for days. Not to mention, the green makeup would stain her skin green. After filming and finished her part in the movie, her skin would remain stained and tinted green for 7 more weeks, and, depending on who you ask, nearly half a year. But her tinted skin was the least of her issues. During her scene in the Munchkin Land, where she makes a hasty exit through fire and smoke, and how it's supposed to work is during that scene, a trap door is supposed to open when the explosions and smokes go off. Want to take a guess on what malfunctioned? That's right, the trap door. The trap door didn't open right. And for worse, the explosions also went off early. This is the worst case scenario. It caused her broom, hat, makeup to catch fire. The green painted actress, whose entire face and neck is covered in green paint, up in flames. She would receive burns on her chin, lips, nose, right cheek, right side of her forehead, her right eyelid, as well as have burnt off eyebrows and eyelashes, as well as receive burns on her hand. She was hospitalized for 6 weeks because of this fiery explosion. After her recovery and her first day back on set, she was asked to film the scene towards the end of the movie when she tells Dorothy to surrender, which, in this scene with a broom, also shoots smoke out the back of it and has fire and explosions. She refused and said, "I will return to work on one condition: no fireworks." Which is fair and understandable, given that a few weeks ago she got blown up and badly burnt. And turns out, was a really smart decision. Steps in her stunt double, Betty Danko, to film the scene, and in the third take of the scene, the broom would, you guessed it, blow up, catch on fire, as well as setting Betty on fire, who severely hurt her left leg and had burns up her body. She would spend 11 days in the hospital and receive permanent scars on her leg. In the hospital, after recovering, she apparently said, "I felt as though my scalp was coming off." So needless to say, not a great feeling. And Margaret, the Wicked Witch, really dodged a bullet there. Circling back to Munchkin Land, which is a mixed bag of chaos, and before we dive into that, no, an actor who played a Munchkin did not hang himself on set. That was a rumor. As far as I know, no one actually died on the set, but some definitely felt dead or wished that they were. The MGM wanted adult dwarfs to play Munchkins instead of child actors, so they hired a man named Leo Singer, who at the time ran a group known as Singer's Midgets. This group, along with people with dwarfism from all across the United States, got brought on to be in the film. Around 124 actors in total, though they did have to fill a few spots with child actors, around 12 if I remember correctly. This was due to the studio saying some of the dwarfs were too tall for the roles. Singer, the man who hired many of the dwarfs, was, well, not a good guy. After being hired to find all these people with dwarfism, he would turn around and minimally take half of each of their pay. Each Munchkin actor was supposed to be paid around $100 a week. Singer would take half of that every time. He would even take more from certain actors. Why those certain actors, I have no idea. Hazel Resimondo remarked it about the treatment of Singer, saying, and I quote, "I only got $5 a day. There wasn't any union or guild or anything for us then. When I complained, Singer said, 'If you don't like your job, you can go home.'" So yeah, Singer not exactly a nice guy. Also, pay to boot, no pun intended, some of the dwarfs were recent American citizens that came over from Europe due to Hitler and the Nazis. And because of this, some of the actors didn't speak English well, which made it easier for Singer to steal money from them. The Munchkin actors were the lowest paid cast members. Even Toto the dog earned more than them, the dog earning around $125 a week. Besides the pay, and I assume terrible working conditions, there was apparently some debauchery. Rumors started that the Munchkins in the after hours at the hotel would have a few drinks, which turned into a lot of drinks, which would occasionally turn into pulling out knives and maybe engaging in orgies. Many of these claims are rumors, as Margaret Williams, an actress who played 2 roles in Munchkinland, says, "They'd have a few drinks and party at night at the hotel there, but they didn't get that rowdy like they said." Which I believe to be a half-truth. Let me explain. I imagine the over 100 actors, most of them calm and collective, probably just having a cocktail after work, no knife-wielding orgies, but a few were definitely handsy, pistol-wielding debauchers. On one account, an actor, Charles Kelly, came to the set because of his wife, who was playing a Munchkin. She was rumored to be sleeping with an actor who was playing the mayor of Munchkinland, Charlie Becker. So Charles, the husband, came to the set, angry, with 2 pistols, and pissed off, and apparently grabbed and took his wife off the set. Another one, which is a story, not sure if there's any truth to it, the same husband also came to the hotel where all the Munchkins were staying, wielding a knife and waving it around. That might be where the rumors started of the Munchkins being knife-wielding, orgy-having actors. Funny enough, the wife was having an affair with the mayor of Munchkinland. They would actually end up marrying later. And for the debauchery that we did know happened, we turn to our lead, Dorothy, played by Judy Garland. That poor woman had an awful, awful time on set. One of the awful things she had to endure were some of the Munchkin men who kept putting their hands up her dress. Nobody did anything at the time because they thought they were just dwarfs and it was all good fun. Dorothy, Judy Garland, also happened to be 16 at the time. And according to Sid Luft, one of Judy Garland's ex-husbands, they'd make Judy's life miserable on set by putting their hands under her dress. These men were 40 or more years old. They thought they can get away with anything because they were so small. And the worst part, that's just the tip of the iceberg of the hell Dorothy went through in making Wizard of Oz. Judy Garland, a 16-year-old, would be pushed the limits during the film. And probably the film was a big reason that played into her problems of mental health later in life. The director and the producers would force her to be on chicken soup, coffee, and 4 packs of cigarettes a day for diet for her to lose weight. She'd be forced to wear a corset to appear even more skinnier, and be forced by the studio and her mother to take drugs as a condition for her employment. The drugs they were giving her were amphetamines, which, after a while, caused her not to be able to sleep. So instead of taking her off amphetamines, they added sleeping pills to her regimen. Amphetamines during the day, sleeping pills at night. Again, and again, and again, for the entire shoot of the movie. Because of this, being forced to take drugs and starving, Judy would have moments on set of not being able to control herself, and being unaware of things going on, which would sometimes cause the director, who we focus on, Victor Fleming, to result to violence. And again, she's 16 during this. A moment of this was during filming the scene when Dorothy slaps the Cowardly Lion. But poor Dorothy couldn't stop laughing when filming the scene. After 7 takes, laughing each time, the director got fed up with her laughing, so apparently he took her around the corner and slapped her. That poor woman went through hell to make The Wizard of Oz, and even worse, she barely got paid. That's right, the main actress of the movie, one of the lowest paid actors in the film. She made only around $500 a week, while her supporting cast, the Scarecrow and the Tin Man, made around $3,000 a week. Luckily though, she survived. So I imagine you might be thinking to yourself, was this movie really cursed? It would explain a lot of the problems, but I imagine a lot of these problems, these issues, the reasons for the idea of the movie being cursed, stems from two things. One being the time period, the time in the movie industry where there were basically no human rights, and the directors and producers and the studios could do whatever they wanted. And the second reason I believe that played a part in this chaotic film for the curse was that the movie had 6 directors. That's right, The Wizard of Oz had 6 directors and 10 different screenwriters. When you have so many different creative minds and not one clear captain of the ship, I believe it was a reason for the chaos and craziness that happened during the filming of the movie. Not one clear direction, but a lot of minds running in many different directions. The original director, Norman Turgot, who got replaced by Richard Thorpe, who got replaced by Mervyn Leroy, who got replaced by George Cukor, who left and was replaced by Victor Fleming. And the movie would end up being finished by King Vidor. And because most of the directors were replaced or left quickly, only Fleming is credited for directing this movie, even though Vidor filmed all of the Kansas scenes and filmed the most iconic song of the entire film, Over the Rainbow, which was almost cut, by the way. Having all these different people in a time where power in the film industry was absolute, I think is what lended the idea of The Wizard of Oz being cursed. So many things went wrong. Stealing, explosions, burns, drugs, fighting, poisoning, hospital trips. So many things. I think it all can be contributed to negligence by the people in power. And I didn't even cover everything that this film had with issues. I just covered the bullet points. If you read the books of the cast members talking about their time on set, it is absolutely crazy. So next time you watch The Wizard of Oz, just remember all the people who not just sweated for the film, not just bled for the film, but also those people who put everything on the line, their mind, body, and soul, in order to bring one of the most iconic movies in human history. With that being said, please treat others with kindness, and thank you all for listening.